You are lying in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. The room is perfectly quiet, but your mind is deafening. You are actively replaying a totally forgettable conversation from 7 hours ago. A slight hesitation in your voice. A strange look someone gave you before turning away. In your head, it is playing in 8K IMAX resolution. You dissect your tone, the awkward pause, the micro-expressions on their face. You feel a heavy, sinking wave of embarrassment in your chest. Why does your brain torture you with completely harmless moments? This is not just a random late-night annoyance. It is a ruthless autopsy of your own behavior. You do this after team meetings, after casual coffee dates, after passing an acquaintance in the grocery store. You constantly search the memory for the exact second you might have ruined everything. Over time, this invisible mental tax severely drains your nervous system. It begins to warp your identity and damage your relationships. Because you fear the midnight review, you subconsciously start to curate your personality. You calculate every word before you speak. You become perpetually hyper-vigilant. You sacrifice your authentic self for the safest, most agreeable version of you, just to avoid the sting of regret later. You probably think this means you are deeply insecure. You probably label this as an unfixable personality flaw. But what if this exhausting habit has absolutely nothing to do with your self-esteem? You need to understand something fundamental about human nature. You are not broken. This agonizing replay loop is not a glitch in your mind. It is a highly evolved biological adaptation. For our early ancestors, safety did not just mean avoiding predators in the wild. Safety meant belonging to the tribe. If you misread social cues and offended the group, you were exiled. And out in the wild, exile meant certain death. Your social overthinking is actually an ancient threat detection system, desperately trying to keep you alive. So, why is it misfiring so painfully today over an unread text message? Let's look at the mechanical wiring inside your head. When you overthink, you are trapped in what neuroscientists call the default mode network, or DMN. This is the brain's primary engine for self-reflection and mental time travel. Think of your brain as a hyper-vigilant night watchman. During the day, the watchman is distracted by immediate external tasks, traffic, and emails. But at night, when the world stops, the watchman patrols the quiet corridors of your memory, looking for hidden vulnerabilities. That awkward pause at lunch? The watchman flags it as a severe social threat. Instantly, your amygdala, the brain's primitive alarm system, injects a tiny dose of cortisol and adrenaline into that specific memory. This chemical injection makes the memory feel urgent and dangerous. Your brain genuinely believes that by endlessly replaying the past, it can protect you from future rejection. But the biological flaw is that the human brain cannot distinguish between a real physical threat happening right now and a remembered social threat from hours ago. How do you calm the watchman when the threat isn't real? You cannot just tell an anxious brain to stop thinking. Telling your mind to relax is like throwing gasoline on a fire. You have to speak to the nervous system in a mechanical language it understands. Here is a 3-step psychological framework. Step 1. The somatic anchor. When the 8K replay starts, you must force your brain to process external sensory data. Grab a physical object, like the heavy edge of your blanket, and focus intensely on its texture and temperature. Why it works? Your brain's default mode network and its task-positive network operate like a seesaw. You cannot deeply process internal rumination and external sensory details at the exact same time. Real-life example. When the agonizing memory hits, squeeze a cold glass of water until the brain is forced to switch back to the present room. Step 2. Cognitive diffusion. We often merge completely with our shame. Instead of thinking, "I am so awkward, I ruined that," you must create psychological distance. Quietly say to yourself, "I am noticing that my brain is running a social threat scan." Why it works? This deliberate labeling shifts blood flow away from the emotional amygdala and into the prefrontal cortex, the logical observing center of your brain. Real-life example. When the agonizing memory hits, squeeze a cold glass of water until the brain is forced to switch back to the present room. Step 2. Cognitive diffusion. We often merge completely with our shame. Instead of thinking, "I am so awkward, I ruined that," You must create psychological distance. Quietly say to yourself, I am noticing that my brain is running a social threat scan. Why it works? This deliberate labeling shifts blood flow away from the emotional amygdala and into the prefrontal cortex, the logical, observing center of your brain. Real-life example: driving home, obsessing over a bad joke, you physically exhale and label it. This is just a diagnostic scan. Step 3. The spotlight reality check. Social anxiety heavily relies on the spotlight effect, the cognitive bias that everyone is intensely scrutinizing our flaws. Consciously list 3 things the other person was likely worried about during your interaction. Why it works. It forces cognitive empathy, immediately diluting your brain's egocentric survival bias. Real-life example: you stumbled over your words, but you stop and realize your coworker was probably stressing over her own upcoming presentation, not your slight stutter. Pulling this all together, remember the night watchman mental model. When the watchman shines a flashlight on a harmless shadow and yells danger, you do not argue with him. Arguing only validates the panic. Instead, you calmly acknowledge his intention to keep you safe from the tribe. Then you gently take the flashlight from his hands. You point the beam away from the illusions of yesterday and anchor it onto something solid and real in the present moment. The next time the projector turns on in the dark, let it play for a few seconds. Watch the tape without judgment. Realize that this exhausting machinery is just proof that you care. It is proof that you are deeply wired for human connection. But you no longer have to let it run the house. You have the specific tools to change the channel. You can let the memory gracefully fade into the shadows, because the only place that awkward moment still exists is in the quiet theater of your own mind.